Her voice cut through the air like broken glass. Kellyanne Conway screamed. Her words sharp, jagged, and dripping with fury. For a split second, the studio froze. Cameras kept rolling, microphones caught every syllable, and millions of viewers felt the shock ripple through their screens. It wasn't just raised volume, it was the raw, visceral eruption of a political insider losing control under the heat of live television. Gasps swept the audience. A few leaned forward in disbelief. Others exchanged wide-eyed glances as if to ask, "Did that really just happen?" The chatter on set fell silent, the tension so thick it seemed to hold the room hostage. Conway's face, flushed and unrelenting, framed a moment destined to be replayed, clipped, and shared across every corner of the internet. But while Conway unleashed volume, the camera began to drift toward Jasmine Crockett. She didn't flinch. The stillness of her posture only magnified the contrast, as if calm itself had walked into the storm.
How?
Viewers could sense something was building, an answer forming, waiting. Ready? And then came the promise that electrified the room. What happened next flipped the entire debate on its head. This was never just another TV spat. What unfolded that night was bigger than one scream, bigger than one exchange. It was a window into the raw fight over who gets to be heard and who gets silenced in America's political discourse. Kellyanne Conway had built a career on weaponizing chaos. She thrived on volume, disruption, and the art of rattling her opponents until they cracked. To her, shouting was more than emotion, it was strategy. Each sharp burst of sound was meant to dominate the stage, to remind viewers that experience and insider clout still carried weight in Washington. Conway represented an entrenched machine that believed power meant drowning out the new voices daring to enter the arena. But she wasn't just sitting under those hot studio lights for herself. She was carrying with her the weight of every underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed figure who'd been told they weren't polished enough, connected enough, or worthy enough to speak on the national stage. Her calm presence wasn't silence. It was resistance. It was a quiet reminder that dignity, even when under fire, could command more power than 1,000 shouts. And so the moment sharpened into a question. Could chaos truly bury calm? Or would the very arrogance of Conway's tactics set the stage? For their undoing, the audience could feel the divide. Some leaned toward Conway's fury, nodding along with her confidence. Others, however, couldn't take their eyes off Crockett's stillness. Sensing a storm, not of noise, but of precision, about to break. And yet, Conway had no idea she was about to face her Comistan's fiercest opponent yet. For years, Kellyanne Conway had been untouchable. She wasn't just another Republican talking head. She was the architect of spin, the woman who could turn defeat into momentum with a single clever phrase. As Donald Trump's chief strategist, she coined the term. That would forever define her style. Alternative facts. With those two words, she rewrote the rules of political communication. Making reality itself a battlefield she could manipulate, Conway thrived where others faltered. When journalists pressed, she deflected. When critics mocked, she doubled down. She was fiery, unfiltered, and unapologetically dismissive of opponents, often leaving them stumbling for words as she bulldozed over their arguments. Her skill wasn't in offering clarity, it was in creating chaos so thick that clarity became impossible. In that fog, she ruled. Cable networks couldn't get enough of her. She was a booking goldmine, guaranteed fireworks, guaranteed sound bites, guaranteed headlines the next morning. Even those who despised her admitted that Kellyanne knew how to win the screen. She had spent decades sharpening this craft, and by 2025 her reputation seemed untouchable. In the ruthless world of live television debates, Conway was seen as the queen of combat, political prizefighter who rarely lost her footing. Opponents dreaded facing her not because she was right, but because she was relentless. She wielded arrogance like a shield and spin like a sword. When others tried to match her blow for blow, they often left the stage looking rattled, small, defeated. But there's a danger in relying too heavily on the same playbook. Arrogance can dull instincts. Confidence can slip into complacency. And Conway, so accustomed to opponents shrinking under her volume and velocity, couldn't see that the old tactics no longer landed the way they once did. The political landscape had shifted, and the public's patience for noise was wearing thin. What Conway didn't realize was that her scream, the very tool that once gave her power, had now become the crack in her armor. And waiting across from her was someone who didn't rattle, didn't stumble, and didn't need to shout to be heard. But even the sharpest political operatives stumble when arrogance blinds them. Jasmine Crockett's journey had never been the easy path. Long before the bright lights of Congress, she was a law student, grinding through long nights, mastering not just the letter of the law, but the art of using it to protect those too often ignored. Where others saw the courtroom as a career, she saw it as a battlefield one, where her victories carried real weight for families, workers, and communities who had no one else to stand for them. From there, she stepped into Texas politics. Places rough and uncompromising as any courtroom. A state dominated by entrenched conservative voices, Crockett's presence was striking. Young, black, female, and unapologetically progressive. She didn't arrive with the blessing of old political machines or corporate donors. She arrived with grit, conviction, and a deep connection to the people she served. Every step forward came with resistance. Every win came with doubt cast upon her. And every time she proved those doubts wrong, her opponents often made the same mistake. They underestimated her. They dismissed her as inexperienced, too soft-spoken, too different to survive in the ruthless arena of politics. And yet each time, Crockett turned those assumptions into weapons. She met arrogance with poise, disrespect with intellect, and attacks with a calmness that unnerved even the most seasoned adversaries. By the time she arrived in Congress, she carried with her not just a resume of courtroom victories and legislative fights, but the invisible weight of representation. Too many watching, she was more than a politician. She was proof that the American political stage could make room for voices long shut out. That brilliance and resilience could rise no matter how loudly the gatekeepers screamed. And so, when Crockett sat across from Kellyanne Conway on live television, she carried with her every courtroom battle won, every underestimation overturned, every moment she had been told she wasn't enough only to prove she was more than enough. Conway screamed with the force of someone used to control. Crockett listened with the patience of someone who had faced this all before. And what Conway could not see, but the audience was about to, was that the same qualities that made Crockett underestimated were the very ones that made her unstoppable. And on that stage, her precision would turn Conway's screams into silence. Kellyanne. Conway leaned in, her voice sharp enough to slice through the studio air. She doubled down, interrupting, mocking, throwing out barbs faster than the moderators could rein her in. Every word dripped with the confidence of someone who believed. The volume of her voice equaled the strength of her argument. To her, dominance was noise, and she wielded it like a weapon. She called Crockett's questions lightweight. She mocked her law degree as though it were a prop, a resume bullet point rather than a lived achievement. She sneered at Crockett's youth, her identity, her refusal to play the political game by the old rules. Conway's hands chopped through the air, her tone rising higher, louder, more desperate with every passing minute. But across from her, Jasmine Crockett sat still. She didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice to match. Conway's instead, she let the storm rage. Every mocking laugh, every overblown interruption, every dismissive jab only deepened the contrast. The audience began to notice it too. At first, they reacted to Conway's volume with nervous laughter, even applause from some corners. But as the minutes passed, the imbalance became undeniable. One woman looked rattled, overextended, shrill. The other looked composed, steady, almost surgical in her restraint. It was a subtle shift, but one that spread quickly through the room. Viewers at home, commentators live tweeting, even the cameramen circling the debate could sense it. The tension wasn't about what Conway was saying, it was about what Crockett hadn't yet said. Every second Conway ranted only sharpened the suspense. What was Crockett waiting for? Why wasn't she firing back? The silence wasn't weakness. It was power, building like pressure inside a sealed chamber. And Conway, too swept up in her own performance, didn't see it happening. She was digging deeper. unaware that the ground beneath her was crumbling by the time Conway leaned forward, finger jabbing toward the air, declaring herself the sole truth-teller on that stage. The audience had shifted fully. Their eyes weren't on Conway anymore. They were fixed on Crockett, calm, steady, unbroken. Crockett blinked once. She adjusted her microphone slowly, deliberately. The entire room seemed to pause, as though it had reached the crest of a roller coaster and was waiting for the drop. Even Conway, still mid-sentence, faltered just long enough to realize she had lost the room's rhythm. The moderators leaned back. The cameras tightened their focus. The audience went quiet, not the awkward quiet of indifference, but the electric quiet that precedes revelation. And then, when the room could hold its breath, no longer Crockett spoke. Jasmine Crockett leaned into her microphone, her voice calm, deliberate, and steady, so steady it sliced through Kellyanne Conway's noise like glass through paper. "Kellyanne," she began, pausing long enough for Conway's name to hang in the air. "I didn't come here tonight to scream. I came here to tell the truth." The audience stirred. It wasn't loud, not yet, just a rustle of anticipation, as though everyone in the room realized they were on the cusp of something. Crockett didn't rush. She let the silence work for her. Then, with surgical precision, she began to build her case not about herself, but about what her presence on that stage symbolized. "I put myself through law school. I didn't inherit power, earned it. I fought for families in Texas courtrooms who didn't have the luxury of spin. I stood in the legislature when people like you told me I didn't belong. And I'm standing here now because every time people like you tried to silence me, you only made me louder." Gasps rippled across the audience. Conway shifted in her seat, her smirk faltering just slightly. The cameras caught at the faintest crack in her armor. Crockett pressed on. "Do you call my law degree a prop? That law degree is the reason women who couldn't afford a lawyer got justice. That law degree is the reason children had their rights defended against systems stacked against them. And unlike you, I didn't use my title to spin alternative facts. I used mine to fight for the truth." The room erupted. Applause, cheers, shouts of agreement. Conway tried to interject, but the sound was swallowed by the audience's reaction. For the first time all night, Conway wasn't controlling the tempo. Crockett waited again. She let the cheers crest and fade before continuing, her tone never rising above firm composure. "See, this is the difference between us. You think chaos is strength. You think shouting makes your argument stronger? But it doesn't. It makes it weaker. Because the loudest voice in the room isn't always the truest, it's often the most desperate." The audience gasped again. Even the moderators shifted forward in their chairs, captivated. Conway's face betrayed her tightened jaw, darting eyes, a forced smile that looked more like a wince. "And Crockett wasn't done, Kellyanne. You built your career on distortion. You stood in the White House briefing room and told America that lies were alternative facts. You treated the truth like it was optional. But here's what I know, and here's what everyone watching knows. You can't spin lived experience. You can't spin justice. Can't spin dignity." The applause was thunderous now. People in the audience rose to their feet. Hands clenched the desk, as if holding herself steady. Crockett lowered her voice, forcing the crowd to quiet down and lean in. "I represent the voices you dismiss. I represent the people you think don't matter. I'm young, a woman, and still here I am, and I'm not going anywhere." That line landed like a hammer. Conway's expression shifted into open frustration, her eyes flashing as if searching for an interruption that could break Crockett's rhythm. But there was nothing she could say because Crockett hadn't left an opening. And then came the pivot, the reframing that turned the confrontation into something bigger than the two women on stage. "This isn't about Kellyanne Conway and Jasmine Crockett," she said, scanning the audience, speaking now to the millions watching at home. "This is about what America values. Do we reward arrogance and noise, or do we reward dignity and service? Do we want leaders who shout the loudest, or leaders who listen the hardest?" The silence that followed wasn't emptiness, it was reverence. The audience leaned forward, waiting. Crockett let the question breathe before landing the blow. "Because if you think my calm is weakness, then you don't understand the strength it takes to be calm in the face of chaos. And if you think my dignity is silence, then you don't understand the power of being heard when it matters most." Conway's composure cracked. She shook her head, muttering into her microphone, but the words were drowned by applause. The audience wasn't with her anymore. They were with Crockett. Every cheer, every clap, every nod was validation. An unmistakable sign that the momentum had shifted entirely, and Crockett, never raising her voice, never losing her composure, sealed the moment with a final, devastating line. "You can scream. Kellyanne, you can shout. You can try to drown me out. But here's the truth. The more you scream, the clearer my voice becomes." The room erupted into chaos, not the chaos Conway had created, but a new kind of chaos. Cheers, chants, the kind of eruption that cameras love and history remembers. Conway slumped back, visibly rattled, her earlier bravado collapsing under the weight of Crockett's calm precision. It was over. Everyone in the room knew it. The moderators knew it. The audience knew it. Social media, already buzzing, was about to explode, and yet this was just the beginning. Because the real shock wasn't just in what Jasmine Crockett said, it was in how America responded. The second Jasmine Crockett delivered her final line, the clip was already halfway around the internet. Within minutes, TikTok had seized on it, remixing the moment when Crockett leaned calmly into her microphone against Conway's red-faced shouting. The captions wrote themselves: "Composure beats chaos." Hashtags ignited #CrockettGom. Hashtag Conway Screams. Hashtag mic drop moment. On X, formerly Twitter. Users flooded timelines with side-by-side GIFs Conway, veins bulging as she yelled, juxtaposed with Crockett's poised half-smile. One tweet shot past 1 million views in less than an hour. When Kellyanne lost her voice, Jasmine found America's. YouTube exploded as well. Reaction channels rushed to upload breakdowns of the debate, titling their videos with words like obliteration, takedown, and historic moment. Each one pointed to the same thing: the exact second Crockett reframed Conway's chaos as weakness. That timestamp became the definitive mic drop. Commentators on cable news couldn't avoid it either. Pundits who once dismissed Crockett as too green were suddenly calling her the new face of calm leadership. One anchor replayed the exchange 3 times in a single segment, marveling at how Crockett turned silence into a weapon. Celebrities joined in. A Grammy-winning singer posted, "This is how you shut down ignorance with grace." A former NBA star tweeted a simple 2-word reaction: "Jasmine won." Even late-night comedians wove the moment into their monologues, mocking Conway's shrillness while celebrating Crockett's measured delivery. And everyday people, the ones often ignored in America's noisy political theater, felt something stir. Clips of teachers showing Crockett's response in classrooms went viral. Parents shared posts saying they wanted their daughters to see this moment, to understand that power didn't always mean shouting louder. A veteran wrote, "I served to protect dignity. Tonight, Jasmine Crockett reminded me why." Meanwhile, Conway's camp scrambled. Staffers fed reporters spin lines. Kellyanne was passionate, not unhinged. But the damage was done. Passion didn't trend screams. Did. And the louder they tried to walk it back, the clearer Crockett's composure looked in contrast. Even conservative commentators, normally quick to defend Conway, struggled. Some avoided the topic entirely. Others admitted grudgingly that Crockett handled herself well. But the viral flood couldn't be stopped. Every time Conway's allies tried to bury the clip, another meme or remix dragged it back into the spotlight. By the end of the week, polls showed a measurable shift. Crockett's national recognition had spiked, while Conway's favorability took a hit. More telling than the numbers, though, was the cultural current. Crockett had become shorthand for grace under fire, her name synonymous with the idea that calmness could be its own form of power. And yet, for all the memes, all the trending hashtags, all the viral clips, something deeper lingered, something harder to quantify, because this wasn't just about who won a shouting match. It was about what kind of leadership America wanted to see reflected in itself. The internet had made its verdict clear. But beneath the noise, the silence Crockett commanded carried the heaviest weight of all, and beyond the memes and headlines, the deeper lessons still lingered. When the noise faded and the hashtag slowed, what remained was not just a viral clip, but a truth too clear to ignore. Jasmine Crockett's triumph was bigger than her. It wasn't merely about silencing Kellyanne Conway on live television. It was about proving, in front of millions, that dignity endures where arrogance collapses. For decades, politics in America has often rewarded the loudest voice in the room. Spin eclipsed truth. Rage drowned reason. Conway herself built a career on weaponizing noise, turning chaos into strategy. But in that single exchange, Crockett flipped the script. She showed that the strongest leader isn't the one who shouts the loudest, it's the one who refuses to be dragged into the mud. Her composure wasn't weakness, it was a shield. Her calm wasn't passivity, it was power, and that power carried. A message that reached far beyond one stage, one debate, one scream. It reached into classrooms, kitchens, and communities across the country, reminding people, especially those underestimated, that their voices matter. Crockett's victory reframed the battlefield of politics itself. No longer was it just about quick jabs or media spin. It was about who could embody a vision of America that people wanted to believe in. An America where truth can still pierce through noise. America where women of color, too often dismissed or caricatured, can stand steady and redefine what leadership looks like. This was why her moment resonated so deeply. It wasn't about policy points or fact-check counters, it was about identity, pride, and resilience. People saw themselves in her. The worker overlooked by a boss, the student dismissed by a professor, immigrant told to stay quiet. In Crockett, they saw not just a congresswoman, but a mirror, reflecting their own struggles and their own strength. And perhaps that is why Conway's scream fell flat.
Oh.
It wasn't just shrill, it was hollow. It carried no vision, no hope, no truth. Crockett's reply, by contrast, carried the weight of every underestimated voice that had ever fought to be heard. The moral could not be clearer. Dignity outlasts noise. Truth outshines spin. Calm dismantles chaos. In the end, Crockett didn't simply win an argument. She modeled a new kind of leadership. A leadership rooted in discipline, empathy, and resolve. A leadership that invites people not to spectate, but to believe again in their country, in their own voices. In the possibility that politics can still elevate rather than degrade. And as the lights dimmed on that stage, the lesson lingered. America's strength does not come from those who scream the loudest. It comes from those underestimated voices that rise again and again, turning silence into power, and chaos into clarity. Because sometimes the calmest voice delivers the loudest truth. From the moment Kellyanne Conway screamed across that stage, to the second Jasmine Crockett delivered her viral, calm reply, the contrast could not have been sharper. One voice was frantic, desperate, clinging to chaos. The other was steady, measured, rooted in truth. In that contrast lay the entire story. Dignity triumphs where arrogance fails. This wasn't just television drama. It was a reminder of what leadership looks like in its purest form. Crockett showed that composure is not silence, it's strength. That justice doesn't always roar, it stands firm. And that in the face of mockery, noise, and spin, the quiet force of truth always cuts through. Moments like these aren't simply viral entertainment. They are snapshots of America wrestling with itself, choosing between the politics of division and the politics of dignity. And every time a leader like Crockett stands tall, it reminds us what kind of country we can still be. If you believe in that fight, if you want to see more epic political takedowns, viral confrontations, and unforgettable stories where truth finds its voice, then don't just watch, be part of it. Subscribe to State Shock today and never miss the moments that define our time.